All right, good morning, folks. Friday,
Friday.
August 2nd, 2024. Rob Browne, Brendan Martin, Darren O'Callaghan, executive producer, Near the Forest people. I got
Getting
a
ready
great
for the
show,
storm.
yeah,
We got
in
a
store
storm
for you
coming up.
today.
We
Well,
got
we
stuff,
just,
storms. We got a hurricane. We got a hurricane headed down this way
yeah,
here,
a
brother.
big blow. Yeah,
Big blow.
we'll be paying attention to that. Might be doing the show from a satellite. But we got Jason Caldwell, AU undercover. Nobody knows Alabama, north, south, east, and west. High school recruiting, college, like Jason Caldwell. He will be joining us. Doug Dean from Birmingham, Dave Tompkins from the Low Country, South Carolina, Frank Duffy, New Orleans, north of Atlanta, somewhere, and then Pat Dye Jr., about half past the hour of Sports Trust Advisors. He is a sports agent, folks. I guess this is his 36th year, over 500 clients. Emmett Smith, people like that. He is a fantastic agent. We're going to talk about his views on college football, what he's seeing coming into the draft. So get pen and paper handy. Smash that subscribe button because here we come. Lots to talk about on a Friday.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne, Jason Caldwell, Doug Dean, and Jason, first start with you. It's been quiet lately. I know you took off the month of July, so I said I'm going to give him a little break, from the show. And you're a great dad and husband, but nothing going on really in state recruiting wise. What do you think's happening?
Yeah, it's been quiet.
Trying to keep a straight face.
Yeah, and like he said, I took the month off of maybe from doing your show, but I didn't have the month off. That's for sure because there's no downtime anymore. The crazy thing is that July becomes baseball transfer portal month, and all these other sports, the portal still going on, all these things. So it's a very different time. But yeah, it's you kick off football season, and it used to be the time where it was all football, and you had all these things. And I did another show recently, and they asked me about kind of what are you looking for. I said, quite honestly, it's going to take a couple of weeks because it used to be when you reported, everything was about, okay, who's here? What do those guys look like? Well, now you know all those things because these guys have already been here so long. So now it's a matter of how quickly does the 4 or 5 guys who haven't been here get adapted. That's it. Then what's the guy look like coming out off the summer? I mean, those are really the big questions. But now it's a matter of starting playing football. I mean, Hugh Freeze said, look, we want to have the playbook in 4 or 5 days. It used to take 4 or 5 weeks to get those things done. But now because of the summer, all the time they have together, most of the guys being on campus in the spring, if you're learning, after the first week in preseason camp, it probably means you're not going to play. And so you better be ready to go.
Yeah. Doug? That's right.
Jason, good morning. Doug Dean of Birmingham. First of all, I absolutely love your nonstop, real-time coverage of recruiting especially, but also your writing when you're talking about what we can expect from Auburn football. I was thinking back to 2009 and speaking only for myself, but I bet I wasn't alone. When Trooper and Looper and Chiswick, those guys rolled out this notion of a Big Cat weekend, and then remember the Tiger Prowl RV, which a certain GOAT coach probably contributed to banning because it was an unfair advantage. I thought it was a little cheesy at first. Nobody's laughing about Big Cat weekend now, are they, Jason?
No, it's so different now because now it's gone from 2 or 3 days to 2 or 3 hours. That's really all it is. But you get guys on campus the day before. They come hang out. The actual event now is only a couple of hours. It's only, scavenger hunt, eating, and kind of having fun. That's pretty much all it is. But it's become an event unto itself. And so now it's just, hey, I'm going to Big Cat Weekend. Now that's all that matters. Is it's become such a thing. And so it's not unique anymore, but it's still unique because it's Auburn's, and it's something that they really did. And so it's become the thing to do. And obviously, when you get a coaching staff that understands the importance of momentum in recruiting, and understanding how important that can be to building classes and to adding other guys, all those things, then you get to see what it can be. And we've seen that the last couple of years, where you go, man, you can point all things towards that weekend and create a whole lot of excitement, energy surrounding your program. Yeah. While I'm not playing the football game, not even practicing football. And they were able to do that.
Sorry, I walked on. And what's smart too, get to Rob here after me, but or Brendan. What's smart, if you think about it, is what might not be authentic or even cheesy at some other program, whoever that is. I don't have anybody in particular in mind. At Auburn, because these kids, whether we like it or not, I happen to like it. You hear every single recruit that commits to Auburn, and some who visit but end up going elsewhere, always talk about it's like family at Auburn. And so I think what's smart about Freeze and other coaches have been successful at it at Auburn is to embrace that and enhance it. And the Big Cat Weekend is mostly that 3 hours you mentioned is mostly about fun and relationships and creating community among this large group of recruits. And as we know, the Auburn, it's not, Harsin never got it, that he was asking people, what does Auburn sell? Well, Auburn sells Auburn. It's right. Of course, everybody's got to have NIL and an environment and a chance to get you to the next level. But this coach, Hugh Freeze, has really embraced the notion of family and perhaps taken it to another level. Do you agree, Jason?
Yeah, that's the thing about NIL. You're not going to just outspend everybody. You're just not going to do it. You just don't have enough money to go, hey, we're just going to go get all these guys, and that's it. That's the only reason they're coming. That's not it. It's never going to be that way. In relationships, fit, culture, all those things are still going to have a massive impact, because somebody somewhere else will probably pay somebody else more than you can. It doesn't matter who it is. But when you get guys that have a bond, but you're right about the thing about Auburn is that you want guys to visit, and then you want to visit again. Then you want to visit again. That's what Auburn does. You might get a couple of guys that might commit somewhere else and do something, but that's the key to Auburn is getting guys coming back, getting people coming back, because that's what it sells, and that's how you do it, and that's the staff understands it. You can't just have a couple of recruiting weekends a year and go, well, that's it. It doesn't work that way. You got to get guys back on campus. And
Auburn fans are feeling greedy, Jason. You're up to the minute on it. There's some news in the next few days ahead? Can you catch us up on that? Recruiting
wise? Jared Smith announces Saturday evening in Birmingham. I think Auburn is the team to beat as of today, and if so, that's another big time pass rusher, another big time in-state prospect, and another prospect from Thompson High School, which continues to load up. So
didn't see that coming.
No, I mean, Hugh Freeze and Mark Freeman, who's the head coach at Thompson, have known each other a long time. And from an offensive standpoint, they're very similar. They click. So they've kind of probably talked for a long time. And so it's opened up some doors. Charles Kelly being on campus has been huge. That's been a big part of things too, all the way around. Offensive guys, defensive guys, relationships in the state of Alabama. All the moves that have been made have worked and have done those things. Now you just have to show it up on the field. And it's a much better roster. It's a much more talented roster. Can you take a step or two this year to back it up on the field? And are you ready to do that? We'll find that out.
Jason, I got to say this too. A couple of years ago, the 33 players in the state, like 22 of them were 4 stars, maybe 7 5 stars. That was like 20% of the 5 stars in America were in Alabama. Auburn got 3 of those guys. The strategy now, all in state. If you're on the fence about taking a 3-star from Utah versus a kid that's grown up an Auburn fan in state, why would you ever do anything but that? But those kids in state are so much more. They can't go home if they quit, if they have any pride, can they?
Yeah, I think in this world of transfer portal, I think having people that have a vested interest in your program other than just, hey, how much money can you pay me? I think that helps to keep a roster together. Now, you're always going to lose players, but I do think that having people that have, hey, family members that went to Auburn, or I grew up in this rivalry, grew up watching Auburn play Georgia and Alabama and these other teams. I do think it has an impact. And hey, look at now, Georgia's a really talented state, but look at Georgia right now. They're recruiting in-state heavily, and Georgia has a lot of players. I do think it has an impact, and I think if your state is talented enough to be that backbone of recruiting classes, and Alabama is now talented. This state's now talented enough to do that. I don't think it was 15 years ago. That's why you saw heavy Georgia, heavy Alabama. I mean, Florida influences for Auburn recruiting classes.
Yeah.
Now, backbone Alabama, go pick some other guys, and I think that's been maybe the emphasis since Hugh Freeze and the staff arrived.
Jason, let me put a finer point. It was a fine point, Rob. I didn't mean that critically. A finer point on Rob's comment about it's I guess kind of unanswerable debate between the wisdom in terms of roster management, roster development to try to win championships. Do you go a heavy foundational core from in-state, or at least from the deep South, or do you go as that in many ways Coach Saban did, and who can question his success? Yeah. He went wherever those players are sometimes. But I think if you go inside from the last 8 or 10 years, which I've done, and Jason does it every day for a living, and looked at where did the great players and roster come from under Coach Saban, there was always a foundational, not always Alabama, because he would go after the best players to fill his roster out, but it was a heavy, deep South flavor. And a thing that is very striking to me, I wrote about it yesterday, is class of 24, Hugh Freeze, 57% in-state. And as we sit right now, 25, that can change by December, 48% in-state players. And these, you don't get to a sixth ranking by signing 2 and 3 stars that are just average and developmental players. They're great players. And then Coach DeBoer he's second ranked. I'm sure their fans are ecstatic, and why not? So there's nothing to dislike about the talent on paper. But what's striking to me is Coach DeBoer, as we sit, both teams have 21 commitments right now. DeBoer is 14% in-state players. Now he wanted several that have committed elsewhere, so you can't be. He's trying, and kids go places for different reasons. And then in 23. Even Coach Saban was 29% state of Alabama. But I just seem to remember, and Dave can fact check me here as always, Saban always seemed to have a deep South core, maybe not always Alabama, deep South core of players who get it about what physical football is like down here. But he would go anywhere he had to, including Hawaii, to get the skilled players that had all the talent. Is it myth or fact that there is something to having a strong, maybe 30 to 40% state of Alabama foundation, in your opinion, Jason?
I think one thing about it is when you make the move from where this staff came from, you've recruited these players for a couple of years. I think you'll see it shift as they, get more ingrained in Alabama and build relationships. But that was always part of it. When people talk about Harsin, people can say whether he did this or that. The big part of it was when you don't have relationships and you don't build relationships, it's hard to recruit players. Yeah. And I think you'll see Alabama do more of it. But Alabama until the last few years, I think was more heavy state of Alabama. Now, skill position wise, especially quarterback, that's been a different take. They've kind of taken quarterbacks from wherever, and a few wide receivers. I think the core foundation has been Alabama. But I just look back at Auburn. We talked about this for years. Every good team Auburn's ever had has had a foundation of Alabama and Georgia players. That's the way it is. Every Auburn team, it doesn't matter who it is. Almost any sport other than swimming and a few other ones, you go to baseball, even basketball, Georgia, it's been a foundation of players that are closer to home.
I think for Alabama football, in Saban going back to Bryant, I think the culture and the locker room was Alabama. and all the storytelling was Alabama and Alabama high school, Alabama family, Alabama tradition. I think the depth was Southeast and, and stretching to Texas. And then I think the skill was anywhere. So we're going to get a kicker from anywhere. We're going to get a quarterback from anywhere. We're going to get an edge rusher from anywhere. But I think that was the blueprint, beginning with Coach Bryant and certainly with Coach Saban.
Hey, Dave, that's brilliant as always. Jason, the mind of Dave here is to be reckoned with.
It's a supercomputer.
And you know what? I think I read into that, Dave, or Jason, Rob, that physical football, learning what it's like to be a D lineman or even an offensive lineman and deal with the heat factor early season. I mean, there is a huge advantage to finding that talent right here in the Deep South. Doesn't have to be from Alabama, but probably South, what we typically think of as Deep South climates and high school programs. And I would say I'm probably going to anger some Texas fans, Rob, but the brand of football in the state of Texas at times, not always, can be a kind of finesse and high octane. And I'm not sure it necessarily creates what we think of as interior alignment on both sides of the ball. So I like Dave's point that you're going to stay in the Deep South to state of Alabama and Deep South to keep those pipelines to high school talent strong and flowing your direction. But then when you go out to get skill players, it doesn't. 4.340 is a 4.3. So you go find that wherever it is, and it works just fine.
Jason, along that line, you look at the in-state. You said on the show 4 years ago. I remember you saying this when you were with Inside the Auburn Tigers. But you said the state of Alabama, high school football-wise, is where the state of Georgia was 10 years ago. Let's get another state of the state address from Jason.
Yeah, no, it's very similar. Georgia just has the top 12 to 15 between Alabama and Georgia, not much different. I think the next –
wow. That's a hell of a statement.
The next 15 to 20 are Georgia still – they don't have as much drop-off. Alabama's drop-off is getting much deeper. So this is a much deeper state. I mean, I think back because somebody asked me about it, about Auburn having an in-state class like this, and when's the last time I felt like this? And I said it absolutely was pre-Saban. You think back to 2006 when you get Neil Caldwell and Tim Hawthorne and a bunch of guys like that from Alabama and Jake Ricks and guys like that, good players, but there weren't nearly as many of them. And Alabama. I mean, that was the Mike Shula times and all those, so Auburn was able to dominate the state, but you're not dominating a state that's this talented and this deep of talent. And so back then it might have been 7 or 8 players, and then you look up and you go, heck, there's 15, 20 players in the state of Alabama that are SEC level guys, and probably 45, 50 D1 type players now, where it used to be you might have. I remember early on doing my previews and do these things, and I would try to get to 25, what I thought were college guys. It'd get tough after you got to about 17, 18 to go. Absolutely, that guy's a D1 guy. Yeah. You don't have that problem now. You can get to those numbers easy without even having to fact check yourself.
Dave, Jason, y'all have there among the Auburn universe that covers recruiting and all. There are competitors, but what I always appreciate between you and your compadres at other sites is that you each bring something cool to the table. And one of the metrics I want to add to the discussion here, which I find interesting to track, is if you look at recruiting classes, you can track not only the percentage in-state, the percentage elsewhere, but there's a particular site that gives you a metric of the distance, which I take to mean where that athlete's high school zip code is to, in this case, Auburn, or let's say Alabama, and it averages that the whole class. And making the point about in-state versus go where the great players are, there's not necessarily a right answer. We'll see in a few years how did it work out, right? But Hugh Freeze, the last 2 classes, 24 classes, average distance of 323 miles. That sounds a long way, but when you pull somebody from Oklahoma or somewhere, it bumps the average. And then this current class, really tight radius, 211 miles. And as we sit, number 2 ranked Alabama class of 25, but it's 822 mile average distance. So he's going all over the country. And that makes sense because DeBoer had relationships with great athletes in places that are not close to this state. But it's just interesting. Does that represent a risk that you have to manage about a kid getting homesick that far away? Maybe it's so individual depending on the player, Jason.
I think it's individual, but I think in this day and age of the transfer portal, I don't know that you can do it two different ways. You can do it like Lane Kiffin and go, hey, we're going to go get some high school guys, but we're going to build heavy in the portal. That's what we're going to do. Or you do it another way and say, look, we're going to try to build through the high school ranks, keep guys on campus, keep the continuity in a program. It's what Kirby Smart's done. Now, you're still going to go get a portal guy or two here or there. But because if that's what you're doing, then to me, like I said, I think it makes sense to get guys that are closer to home that have maybe a foundational build with your program over the years.
Dave, I know you got another question before we let Jason get on, but great conversation. We really appreciate you being on.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw out kind of a gut feel thing, intuition, and appeal to Jason's much stronger set of facts. In my opinion, again, gut intuition, Georgia is per capita the best football state in the country. There's potentially more from Florida and Texas, but they're much bigger states in terms of population. I mean, even my little school, Army. I mean, Georgia is our primary feeder state for the 2-star players that Georgia and become service academy players and play for Army and Air Force and Navy. And then you go up, and then go up a star or two. That's the SEC, and then you go to the top, and that's Georgia, and hopefully more Auburn.
Yeah, no, it's Georgia. You're right. When you're talking about per capita states, I think about Georgia being at the top. Alabama and Louisiana are two others where you go per capita, the numbers of potential NFL guys and all these things, they're right there. Georgia, that's why I said Georgia's the deepest to me in terms of quality. And you have so many high school. Georgia used to be a South Georgia and outlier. Yeah. That's where the kids came from. And now Georgia is predominantly metro Atlanta, North Atlanta, Beaufort, Grayson, Milton, all those alphabet. That's where the talent level is now in Georgia.
Wow.
It used to be south of the airport. Now it's predominantly north side of Atlanta. That's where, we'll go to games this year. Like early on, we have Milton and Beaufort playing each other. And between the 25 and 26 classes in that game, there'll be 35 to 40 D1 guys probably on the field.
Well, I can tell you, every LSU long snapper, the last 3 of them, including a national championship player, came from Beaufort High School.
There you go. And what, Grayson.
That's a cool stat.
Grayson's loaded in 26 class. A bunch of young guys, they play at Thompson early on this season on an ESPN game. And so you'll go, the difference will be the depth of numbers of D1 guys. Thompson's front line will be comparable, but Beaufort's second and third guys will be guys that maybe he's a sophomore, but he's already got 14 offers. That's kind of how it works now in some of those programs.
Jason, here's a cruel reality from a year ago that recently Alabama and Georgia and probably LSU have not had to cope with. But last year, most Auburn fans that are fair were pretty ecstatic that Hugh Freeze came in and class of 24 was ranked 8th or thereabouts, depending on the service. And guess what? That gets you 5th in the SEC, 5th ranking in recruiting behind all the usual suspects.
Jason, that is the coolest stat, though, talking about Beaufort, because when I go to Dunwoody to the Mad Italian, it's about 8 minutes away, and it's full of transients. That's another thing about it. But look, Jason, let's get you back on again next week. We love having you back on.
Real quick, I just looked. Alabama's 25 class is really good. Has 17 4- or 5-star prospects. Georgia has 35 4- and 5-star prospects in the 2025 class. So the top level, pretty close, but the depth of classes in Georgia now continues to grow. Yeah. To me, it's what you thought about when Auburn was recruiting Florida and Dillard and all those schools. Yeah. You looked up, there's still talent in Florida. but the talent's in Georgia because of development, all the things that go along with it, and those they're just producing guys. Alabama's catching up, but still got a ways to go.
Jason, doesn't the talent in the rich state of Florida get just diluted because there's so many schools that you're competing with to land players?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think the lack of maybe some coaching salaries in the state and kids moving around because they don't have borders. They can move schools all over the place. I think that hurts sometimes too. The same way it does with transfer portal. I think it hurts high school kids too when you start moving so much and you miss out on developing in a program, in a system, and you get lost because somebody goes, where I don't know where he's at school now. I lost that kid. Who was that young guy you had last year? Well, he's gone. I think that's part of it too.
You got
Jason, I didn't know that you can switch schools in Florida and not have to sit for a year.
You can switch schools during the year.
I did not know that. Okay, go ahead, Doug.
A week before the Iron Bowl, Coach DeBoer gets a transfer from Auburn University. Wouldn't that be wild? Not intending to play him, just to keep him from helping Auburn. Anyway, we're in a wild world. Go ahead, Rob. I lost my thought.
No. I was just going to say it is a wild world. Jason, let people know how they can keep up. I heard you on Chuck Oliver. Chuck was a freshman when I was a senior at Auburn, and heard you on his show this week. He was giving you compliments, but they're worth it. But glad having you back on here, and just a great segment. But make sure people can follow you. And I know Doug has another question. But
yeah, before you do, Jason, and tell us how to find you and sign up for your outstanding site. You got to tell Auburn fans and rivals for that matter, where is Coach Freeze headed with the class of 25 QB recruitment? Should we be feeling the luck of the Irish, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I've said for a couple of weeks now that I thought it was going to be one of two guys. When you start going down the list and you start, okay, what's going to happen? I thought that either Deuce Knight or KJ Lacey would be in Auburn's class as a quarterback before the dust settled. Nothing's really changed that opinion for me. We'll see if that happens, but I do think that's going to be obviously a priority to finish off this class. So I still would lean towards one of those two guys. So yeah, can do that. Practice started yesterday. We'll have more practice view windows today. So you can find some photos, videos, all that stuff. So check us out at auburnundercover.com and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or whatever at ITATJason.
All right. One of the great ones from Sylacauga, Alabama, Jason Caldwell. Appreciate it. See you next week.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Rob, I referred obviously
to your world a little bit if I could. I'm going to dip into Rob's world. Investing. I think Alabama, the culture, if it's a stock, Alabama's a Warren Buffett stock. It's Berkshire Hathaway. It's going to beat the S&P 500, over a period of 30 years. I think Auburn is a momentum stock. Auburn gets on a roll. Auburn gets on a roll every couple of years, and when they get on a roll, they beat everybody, including Alabama. And I think they're that close. I think they're one sort of momentum signature win away from getting on one of those rolls where they make it to the playoff and make it to the national championship.
Dave, besides being smart as a whip, weren't you a Citadel guy? Did I get that right?
West Point.
I'm sorry. Oh, that was insulting of me. West Point. Besides being super smart, yet again, you proved to be the classiest guy on the show. Nice compliment there. And I think your analogy is dead on.
Hey, let me do this.
I'm not going to take Auburn on a 30-year versus Alabama. I'm going to take Alabama any day of the week. But in a given year when Auburn gets on a run, they beat everybody. And they beat everybody with these spectacular games that you remember for the rest of your life.
You could almost say, I'm being snarky here, at times Auburn feels a little more like crypto day trading, right?
Hey, let's do this.
Hey, Rob, before you say it, I'm just going to go lowbrow. Y'all have this fight amongst yourselves. Just stay the hell out of Louisiana.
Yeah, right. All right. Pat Dye Jr. is going to join us right now. Brendan's in there working with him in the green room. And Pat, first off, thank you for taking time to join us. Is this 35th or 36th year that you have been a sports agent? Because I think you've got over 500 clients, but welcome aboard to the Friday College Football Roundtable.
Appreciate you having me on, Rob. I can barely hear y'all.
Okay. If you can check your volume, I know Brendan will work on that, but is this any better?
No, my volume is all the way up.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Brendan, we're going to get Brendan to try to bring you back in, possibly Brendan. But if he's not hearing us, what else can we do? I think he's working on that. Okay. We're going to see if that's any better. Okay. And is that any better, Brendan or Pat?
No.
Okay. All right. Brendan, do you want him to try to reboot and come back in?
Rob, I wonder if he could go cell phone only and get a better audio.
Well, yep. Let's see. Let's just try to see if this video link will work. It should be the volume. Pat, can you try to come back in on the link and reboot and see if it works that way? And then Brendan will
I'll try.
Okay.
Y'all are dealing with a very technologically challenged individual here. So
right. We all are. That's what I'm. But we'll try that and see if that works. And then if not, we'll go to phone only.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
I went back to my earphone. If I can be heard better.
Yeah. That's better. And one of the things about it is sometimes there's I don't know. I think there's aliens out there that just come in when you got a great show going and just boom. Yeah. You just got to be prepared for it. It's like the old pilot, you got 4 engines, you lose 1. Well, you got 3 others. Someone says, we do more open heart surgeries than anything. Well, not on my heart, but Pat, is that any better?
No.
Okay. Brendan, is there anything that you can do for him from your end, or should we just try to come in audio only?
Hey Pat, if you just check maybe your laptop volume, or if you're on a laptop, is there computer volume that you can turn up by chance? Okay.
Pat, do you see the laptop on your laptop, the volume button?
I'm on an iPad.
Okay.
I've already checked my volume. It's
okay.
It's wide open.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. It's gonna be probably the iPad volume's not loud enough on the internal speaker.
Okay.
Well, here's the thing. We can hear him great. So if we can just shout our questions, I think we'll be all right.
Yeah. Pat, because none of us are technically. I'm kind of screwed too, but we can hear you great.
Pat knows, Pat, your audio when you're speaking is coming through crystal clear for what it's worth.
Great.
Okay.
All right, great.
All right, Pat,
I'll listen closely.
Yeah. Hey, Pat, if we can just get started, tell us, what you're seeing now. You have an opportunity it's unique. You get to talk to a lot of the top coaches. I know Nick Saban thinks the world of you, and you probably represent more Alabama players than any other school in the league. But what are your thoughts on the players that are coming into the draft that you see down at Senior Bowl week with Jim Nagy and when you're out around scouting every year?
What am I seeing in terms of the players coming in the Senior Bowl?
Well, just coming out of college, are they developed like they need to be, or what are your thoughts compared to, say, 15, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you look at the size of the staffs that these great programs have, I mean, Alabama, Georgia, Auburn, Texas, whoever, I mean, you've got probably, I would say, easily triple the number of staff members as you had back when my dad was coaching. And you got all the quality control guys and analytics. And I mean, when you look at if they truly list their whole staff at Alabama or Georgia or Auburn, wherever, I mean, it's just like dozens of them. And my dad didn't have that back in the day. So to the point of preparation, I mean, these guys are in the great programs with, people like Coach Saban and Coach Smart, and hopefully Coach Freeze gets there as well. I mean, the attention to detail and the nuances and all of that. I mean, these guys are very well prepared. The lifting, the nutrition, the sports science, the recovery. These big programs are running themselves like an NFL team, and they're dedicating similar financial resources, human capital, all of those things to, trying to optimize their program, which therefore is going to optimize the performance of the player. And I think they're coming into this league now. They're far better educated, far better prepared on how to take care of their body, and recovery, and the right way to lift and the right way to eat, and there's just, I don't know, there's so much more science involved, if you will, so much more supervision involved. I'm seeing now that, just about all these programs, the kids are practicing with the helmet protector on, for concussion stuff. You didn't see that even 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
With college teams.
They truly are pros on the college level. They truly are professionals at what they're doing, at their craft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pat, Doug Dean in Birmingham. And I do want to say, without making the show about my favorite coach of all time, your father, but I tell people, if you can love Shug Jordan and all he accomplished, and Coach Tuberville and Gus Malzahn in his own right, and I could name others, if you can love and respect them as an Auburn man, but still be able to say, my Auburn coach will always be Pat Dye. I wanted to tell you that. And that's I think how a lot of Auburn people feel right now, and will feel for a long, long time to come. I'm looking at a interesting graphic, not a surprising one, with one exception I'll mention that you can comment on, but the most combined NFL earnings by school in the SEC. No surprise, Alabama's sitting there, a tidy $539 million. LSU, Oklahoma, Georgia drops to $220 million. Auburn's in there at 18th with $127 million. Mississippi State, $168 million. And, somebody should build a statue for Dan Mullen. I saw Moscano post, Duffy, because there are 4 top 100 NFL players that were state players. Your comments on the richness of talent that the SEC continues to put in the league.
Well, I think, when you think about high school football in Florida, and the number of people in Florida, you think about high school football in the state of Georgia, Alabama, so much talent in the state of Louisiana, and, a lot of talent in Mississippi. Football is king down here. It's important. It's part of our culture. It's a part of our fabric. And I think football is easily, for lack of a better word or phraseology, I think football is easily the coolest sport to play, in our part of the country. So you've got this really, really deep talent pool of kids that have been playing, in some cases, since they were 5 or 6 years old. So you've got a lot of human beings that in this part of the country, and this part of the country is only growing. I mean, the Sun Belt, and, because of some of the things going on around in other parts of our country, but it's always been a very, very fertile ground for the production of high school football players, therefore college football players, and on to the NFL. And I think that, we can all agree that the Southeastern Conference has been a clear-cut, dominant conference, on the college football landscape, probably for the last 20 plus years. And I think it's probably been number one for, I don't know how long, but it's really kind of separated itself, it seems like, with what Coach Saban did at Alabama, and then you had LSU win a national championship, you've had Florida win a national championship, you've had Georgia, and they're always in it seems like. So, and I think that, what's that expression? Iron sharpens iron. And,
yeah.
I don't care if you're playing at Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, whatever. When you're playing against SEC competition every week, it makes you a better player, and it reveals talent. And so it's no surprise that the SEC, just as a whole, as a conference, is, a major pipeline for, for NFL players. And I think SEC competition week in, week out, SEC programs, SEC preparation week in, week out is as close as you're going to get to the NFL in all of college football.
Dave, yeah.
Quick little diversion. The best Auburn athlete was never quite big enough to make the football team. But what a floor exercise last night by Suni Lee to get the bronze. The comeback, that was just fantastic. That was
cool.
Tremendous TV. Obviously, Simone Biles the best ever, and the GOAT. But tremendous, if you will, fourth quarter comeback by Suni Lee last night.
Yeah, I was traveling last night, coming back from a recruiting trip, and unfortunately, I've been able to watch very little of the Olympics. I love it. I'm very patriotic, but so much of it's taken place during, business hours that I just haven't been able to, to keep up with it much. I hear my employees out. We have television monitors all around our offices just because we keep it on the NFL network or the SEC network or ESPN, but they've been tuning into the Olympics, and I hear them cheering and screaming and stuff. I'm like, what are y'all doing? And we need to get back to work here. But I have unfortunately not been able to take in much of the Olympics. But yeah, she's a great story, and I know there've been other Auburn athletes, participate in the Olympics. But she's a great story and a great brand ambassador for Auburn, and obviously, won it all, I guess, in Tokyo. Before she actually came to Auburn.
Yeah.
So
and Tad, I remember when she came to Auburn, she'd been on Dances with the Stars 8 times and got $200,000 per appearance, had $1.6 million in the bank, but because NIL was so new, believe it or not, the compliance people kind of made things difficult, and she had to bum rides to class and stuff when she first got there because she couldn't spend any of that money. Frank, jumping here with Pat Dye Jr. of Sports Trust Advisors in Atlanta, in Buckhead, folks. I tell you what, this is a great conversation because we're hearing it from somebody that is the tip of the spear. But Frank, jump in.
Well, Pat, I live up here in Big Canoe, up here in the North Georgia mountains, and know your shop very well. And it's funny that you were mentioning your office because one of my very close friends, Scott Alexander, of course, was in your barn back in the mid-2000s, working and recruiting, working agent-wise for your basketball operation back in the mid-2000s. And I know he worked damn hard on Big Baby Davis and Tyrus Thomas and Garrett Temple hard. So my question on that vein is, what is it like to be work as an agent in different sports, basketball, football, and how do those compare and how you're handling not only recruiting clients to your service, but also managing them as they go forward with their contracts and their personal lives?
Well, I would start by saying that I have always looked at basketball as a completely different animal. I think that you're able to identify basketball phenoms earlier, like a LeBron James or someone like that. And then you've got the Michael Jordans who got cut in the 10th grade. But I think basketball, it's starts and stops with the AAU, or at least it used to. And those guys are super involved in where the kids go to school. They're super involved in, the shoe companies get involved in the recruiting and all that. So I had done some basketball with a prior firm before I started this company. And as you know, Scott had a great background in basketball. So yeah. I made a decision to hire him and invest the seed money and his salary and expenses and time and all. And candidly, getting kind of quote unquote, getting back into it, but because I had focused on football for, 15, 20 years before Scott came on, but getting back into basketball, it didn't take me very long to figure out that it's just a completely different animal, a completely different network, and not one, frankly, that I found very appealing. The way things are done, and a lot fewer players,
a lot of prima donnas.
Yeah, and as we all know, I mean, one basketball player can totally change a team, and that's hard, for one football player to total. I mean, Bo Jackson's probably as close a thing, Herschel Walker, Cam Newton, are as close of players that literally overnight could change a team or a complexion of a team or competitiveness of a team. But basketball, I mean, you get LeBron James, you get a Michael Jordan, you get some of these other great players that can flip your program, really quickly. So, that was a 2-year experiment, if you will. And I think Scott found it very frustrating as well. And, we both agreed to kind of refocus our efforts and energies. But all we do now is represent NFL players. I certainly should be representing coaches, given my background and my dad's career. And I did represent him. I've represented several other coaches, but it's not something that I've proactively sought out, like, say, Jimmy Sexton in Memphis. I mean, Jimmy's had a phenomenal career, representing coaches and dominates the landscape, particularly the college landscape. And it's funny, because I know Jimmy well, and I asked him when he first got into it, why are you doing this? And he really looked at it as a segue or an entree to get players.
Wow.
He thought representing Tommy Tuberville at Ole Miss, who was one of his first guys, would help him sign Ole Miss football players that he was going to be recruiting as NFL clients. So it was really initially for him, I think, a bit of a lost leader. And good Lord, it evolved.
Did he come out of the outhouse into the clover? Holy man!
Yeah. No, but he's had a great career doing it, and it's something that I kick myself for not getting into it, sooner. But it's not too late, and so we'll see.
Well, Pat, to follow up Doug's comment on a personal note, Duffy Realty, we were a big sponsor of the Atlanta Touchdown Club for many, many years. And I had the good fortune to be sitting next to your dad at one of the luncheons. And his stories were just absolutely phenomenal. And, I know he had a little bit of a touch of rapscallion in him like us, but I could not pick a more perfect example of a Southern gentleman than your father. And it was a pleasure to get to know him and talk to him. And we had some wonderful conversations about some old Auburn LSU battles back through the years.
Well, he, obviously was a pretty good coach, but I think an even better man. Great dad. But yeah, and I feel like I can say this objectively. When you look at what Auburn was when he got there, Ofer did not win an SEC game the year before he got there, and he comes there and he's sandwiched between Coach Bryant in Alabama coming off a national championship in '79, and then Vince Dooley and Herschel Walker coming off a national championship in '80, and he takes that job. His first season's '81. And I literally told him, I said, Dad, this is professional suicide. You're out of your mind. And just seeing what Auburn was when he got there made me feel even more strongly about that. The athletic department was $15 million in the red back when $15 million was really a lot of money. And the facilities were horrible. The coaches were sharing, offices with no windows in the basketball coliseum. Had been playing football for almost 100 years there and won one SEC championship in the history of the school. And he wins 4. Of all the things that he did, and I think winning 4 SEC championships, in a 12-year span, and really it was an 8-year span.
Especially during that span. During that span. That was one of the most competitive spans we've had in the SEC.
Yeah, and back then, as y'all know, I mean, Dad called it Amen Corner because he's from Augusta, but, playing Florida, Georgia, Alabama, almost in consecutive weeks, and those when those programs were really top notch. And then that '83 team, my God, Florida's number 3 or 4. Go to Athens, they're number 2 or 3, and then we come home and play Boomer Esiason in Maryland for homecoming. They're number 7. Then we have to go to Birmingham and play Alabama, and they're like 6 or 7. Then we have to go and play Michigan, and they're in the top 10. Our last 5 opponents were in the top 10, and I think we played 8 bowl teams that year out of 11 teams on our regular season schedule. And that was back again when a bowl game meant something. But the fact, I mean, in today's world, that team would have absolutely won a national championship.
No doubt.
And I feel bad for that team. I also feel bad for the 94 team. That
93.
Was it 90?
93.
No, what year was it?
Undefeated 93.
Undefeated
2004.
93.
2004 undefeated.
2004. What was the year that we like really got strong towards the end of the year and played a very hot Virginia Tech team in the Sugar Bowl?
04. Yeah.
2004.
Okay. Yeah.
That was a
team.
good job.
Cadillac, Ronnie Brown, Jason Campbell.
Yeah.
Love to have seen them play USC. Everyone would.
Oh, completely got left out of that game, and USC beat Oklahoma, 60-something-0 or whatever it was.
Beat the hell out of them.
Yeah, but that team was really, really good as well. So,
Pat, some back to Jimmy Sexton, you got to tip your hat to him. Some would call him an unregulated monopoly, right? But it works, and it's legal as far as I know. But I wondered, with the changes in NIL and the court rulings that continue to favor athletes being compensated, possibly athletes becoming employees or collectively bargained sooner than later, the question that some fans I think would like to better understand, I think you're qualified to talk about it, is whereas baseball has developmental leagues that they financially support, and the college does the developmental work for the NFL, and I guess it works right now. But could we see that change and have unique kinds of partnerships that the NFL becomes interested in funding, or not likely?
You know, I don't think it's certainly not an outlandish idea. But here's the two things I know. I don't know that Kirby Smart's going to want to be answering to an NFL team about who he signs, how he coaches, whatever. And then the other piece is I know a lot of the NFL owners, and they're very bright men, and they didn't get wealthy by giving their money away. And if they've got a free farm system in place, and we just talked about the SEC, and I mean it's AAA football, to the NFL. And if you've got a free farm system, heck, the NFL right now is not even supporting a spring league, which I think that's the UFL's design is for for the league to be competitive enough and well run enough, and to at least not be a revenue loser. Their hope would be that the NFL would buy that league and use it as a developmental league, because we do need that. And I've got kids that play in the UFL, and they're getting signed by NFL teams. So I have to think that's their goal. I don't think their long game is, we're going to make billions of dollars based on ticket sales and television rights fees and things like that. So I just, again, I think as long as the NFL has a free farm system right now, which they do, they're not going to volunteer to, be funding these programs and that kind of thing. And then the other piece is too, and I think we can all stipulate to the fact that we're all big SEC football fans, whether you're an Alabama fan, Auburn fan, Georgia fan, LSU fan, what have you. There's a certain amount of pride in your school and your program, and to have that kind of diluted a little bit by being controlled by what is the most powerful sports entity in our country by far, not even close. The NFL. I just don't know if there's a lot of appetite for that.
Pat, this is a reach perhaps, but we're in uncharted waters. What could be the tipping point is if the cost of compensating players when this all flows through leads to a big swath of programs that are not top 30 or 40 historically. They just say, well, we're just going to not play. We're going to discontinue football and focus our resources on basketball and other sports. Then all of a sudden you wonder, does the NFL have enough teams, developmental teams, to my point, to keep the league stocked year after year?
Well, I think I heard your question right. I think, again, we all know the passion for football, particularly in this part of the country. And we can sit around and complain about how much money the alumni or the donors or the boosters or however you want to categorize them, how much they're having to give to their school's collective and how much of that is flowing to the players and all that. But and I think my dad's a great example of it. I'll guarantee you Auburn's fundraising was a hell of a lot better while he was the head coach and became a lot better than it was before he was head coach. I mean, I think it drives student applications.
Oh yeah.
Your brand being on television, and flashing the student section on ESPN or CBS or whatever. Sure. And these high school kids are watching that. They're like, man, I want to be a part of that. And it could be at LSU. It could be at Florida. It could be at Georgia. I'm not just saying Auburn, but I just think that the school pride and student applicants and all that, it is a catalyst. It is a fundraising catalyst. And look, I mean, I don't know what Auburn's football program did in revenues last year, but I would bet it's over $100 million. I don't think they're spending $100 million on players.
Yeah.
And through that, having a winning program, I mean, that drives and I'm just throwing out examples, the Tim Cooks and the Raymond Harberts and the Jimmy Raines, it gets them emotional about giving and, building buildings. And then the other dynamic, and I'm way not qualified to talk about this, but, I think Auburn's student body for the first time recently is more out of state than it is in state. And
Alabama's is. Auburn's not.
It's not?
Yeah, Auburn
is 63% in state, and Alabama's right the reverse of that.
Alabama's 38%.
I misspoke on that, but I know this. There are a lot of buildings coming out of the ground at Auburn, and I think that the incredible interest from out of state, and I live in Atlanta, and I can't turn the corner without running into a set of parents that are my friends that both went to Georgia or both went to Vanderbilt or both went to Alabama, wherever, whose kids are going to Auburn, and they just love it. And, the proximity to, Atlanta to Auburn, and then you've got the whole dynamic with the Hope Scholarship in the state of Georgia. It's gotten so hard to get in the University of Georgia that these kids, 1B is Auburn. And so anyhow, I think we're somehow, some way we'll figure out a way to have college football, and it may end up being 30 teams. It may end up being I don't know, 7 or 8 teams from the SEC, and then Texas and USC and Notre Dame and Oregon, whatever, and it be kind of its own league, almost like the NFL has 32 teams. Yeah. You could have that super conference, if you will, or super league, or, what have you. But it is, my dad started coaching when I was 3 years old. I started doing this when I was 24. So I was around football literally since I could walk, and I'm still in it today. And without question, there's nothing even close that has occurred during my dad's career or my career that remotely approaches the impact that NIL has had on college football. It's not even close. You can talk about scholarship limitations. You can talk about the 25-hour rule. You can talk about staff size limitations. There's nothing ever that has turned college football upside down like NIL had, and it's turned my business upside down because it's allowing a lot earlier interfacing of agents with players. And I mean, there are high school seniors that have agents that are negotiating with these schools' collectives. They're true freshmen that have.
Oh no. Holy cow.
Come back, Pat. Come back, ET.
It truly did unshackle the agents. It really did. It opened up. It's like the Oklahoma land rush, I'm sure, right now. And that's what Pat was talking about with the AAU players, like in basketball. And the problem is you've got all of their personal advisors and their consultants that have no concept of money, that are giving them bad advice during the process. They need agents like Pat to step in and help them navigate what they're doing, especially with getting NIL money in high schools.
Yeah, Pat will have to have tough decisions to make case by case. Is every high school senior that's getting NIL money worth his time when he's trying to get NFL contracts that really pay the bills? I was going to ask Pat, I hope he bounces back in, that it seems to me, for a lot of reasons that you have to kind of know Auburn to appreciate, Rob knows, that NIL coming along, in the words of the great Lane Kiffin, the NCAA finally legalized cheating. And so whereas Auburn, especially Malzahn's worried about getting fired, so he's not taking any dark gray areas in recruiting or his elite boosters that are out there and assistant coaches trying to do it. You don't have to now. So I think Auburn, whereas they were going too far, too ultra conservative with quote compliance, that's off the table, largely off the table now. And so I chuckled at a rival fan tweeting that something's going on at the barn. They're cheating down there. And about last weekend, a domination in state with recruiting and so far with Freeze. And to which you can say there's no such thing as cheating now.
No. Hey, look, the Samsonite briefcase industry went the way of the horse and the buggy industry the second that NIL came in. Those briefcases of cash that were being given out to West Jefferson running backs allegedly in 1980 in Louisiana to get them to come to LSU, they no longer happen anymore. They can write checks and hold them up like it's the publisher's clearinghouse.
There's a lot of things going the way of the dinosaur. I wrote yesterday, Duff, that we will no longer see, I'm kind of sad about it, that big storyboard, the play call signal from the sidelines, because they're going to all have helmet comms. And I hope your innovation that you're invested in, I'm sure they will combine. You have a combo, an air conditioner and a microphone, player to coach communications.
Well, here's the funny part. It opens it up wide open on the high school level, because the things that kept Tiger Air from getting in was the fact that you couldn't have a foreign object in your helmet. That's going to be going to the high school level, because you know it all trickles downhill.
Yeah, I sent the link. The old iPad conked out. I had something happen, Pat, on the show last week. The light, I'd forgotten to charge the light, and so it's like, holy cow, stuff happens. But I wanted to reference real quick. You were making some great points, but you talked about that 1983 Auburn-Florida game. 56 players that played in that game, 27 from Auburn and 29 from Florida went on to play in the NFL. So it's crazy. And when I was in Auburn last week, I stayed at Waller and Susan May, Dr. May, and they've known you and your dad and your family since y'all lived in Tuscaloosa on their street back in the 60s. And they love y'all. And I can tell you something else. You told me, I think, when your dad took that job at Alabama, he got $87 a month being in the National Guard, and he'd go to Camp Shelby every summer for a couple of weeks. You have grown a football life, and I'm wondering when the coffee table book is coming out, Pat. Like, you have a lot of spare time.
Well, I definitely want to write a book, and I think it would be, I can write about growing up in the locker room with Bear Bryant, John Hanna, Johnny Musso, who was my hero. Standing on the other sidelines for Punt Bama Punt and crying my eyes out as an Alabama fan, and growing up literally being being raised to hate Auburn, being raised to say Roll Tide from the time I was old enough to talk. And then, he goes to East Carolina, is there for 6 years, and there's some great stories with playing Lawrence Taylor at North Carolina and different things like that. Growing up in the household with my dad, the way I grew up, there was a point in time, Rob, to your point, that Dad's an assistant at Alabama, and Coach Bryant, he thought it was a real honor for you to coach for him. He did not. he wasn't real interested in compensation, and I get it.
He was paying people in boxes at Chesterfield's.
You're getting a good education here, but literally, and I'm not exaggerating this, there was a point in time where I was the oldest of 4 kids, and Dad was making $500 a month.
Wow.
And I mean, we were so freaking poor. My mom had to make our Christmas presents, and if it wasn't for the deer we killed and the fish and other wildlife that we took, I mean, I never had a steak until I was 12 years old. I ate a lot of deer meat and a lot of dove and quail and duck and squirrel and rabbit and whatever else. Ate a lot of fish. And I look back on it, and it sounds like I might be complaining about it, but I wouldn't take anything in the world for it.
It's
really,
not the destination. It's not the destination. It's the journey getting there. And you're exactly right. Those graduate assistant coaches, they do it for the absolute love of doing it. But listen, Pat, if you write that book, you got to have at least 3 chapters on those bourbon conversations out on that porch. You got to add those in, because those are legendary. Even us LSU fans have heard about those Pat Dye bourbon conversations on y'all's cabin porch.
Well, I'll tell you this, and as y'all know, it's pretty well publicly documented that Dad's farm, went to Auburn, and so his estate plan, his will, if you will, no pun intended, was that to try to, he had a 3-person board. They're all sharp businessmen and good Auburn men, and knew what Dad's mission was and what his intent was and all that. And so they had the quail hunting, they had the lodging for the football games, they had the tree farm, they hosted weddings, and so all these things were generating revenue. And Dad's wish was, if y'all can keep it sustainable, keep it sustainable. But if it's unsustainable financially, I want the property to go to the university. Well, I mean, 18 months in, the board is calling me and saying, Pat, we can't do it. I said, guys, look, the reason people came out there to quail hunt, and the reason people came out there to buy Japanese maple, and the reason people had their weddings out there is gone. Okay? This is not some 50,000 acre plantation down in Thomasville, Georgia. This is a rural little piece of property in Macon County. They're coming there because of Coach Dye, and to hear those stories that you're talking about and hanging on every word. And he was so good at it, so good at entertaining, and it never got old for him. And I think there is no doubt that 90% of his business was recurring revenue streams of guys coming back because they had so much time the time before.
No doubt. No doubt. And by the way, I've got a picture of your dad at the Atlanta Touchdown Club telling stories to my good buddy Buck Ballou, great, national championship winning quarterback at Georgia. When we did all of our work with 680 The Fan, John Kincaid, a good buddy of mine, and we're sitting there watching your dad tell stories. And I tell you what, our jaws are dropped with how great his stories were, just waiting to go in to have lunch at the Touchdown Club. He was an incredible storyteller. Him and Danny Ford were my favorite guests of all the years that we were sponsors. Favorite guests.
Yep. Well, you'll appreciate this story. So I know this sounds crazy for a Southern country boy who ended up living in a big city in Atlanta, but I built a house up in Nantucket, and I was probably a half mile from Belichick on the island. And so I'd run into him a good bit, and I dealt with him a bunch. I had Dante Hightower and some other players of his, and Heath Evans that played for him, that played at Auburn.
Yeah, Saints too.
So I talked Dad into coming up, and I said, I need to take this opportunity to get Dad and Belichick together. And I really, going into it, I really thought it was going to be more about Dad really getting a thrill out of meeting and talking to Belichick, because Belichick was literally at his very top. And this is maybe 10 years. And so we agreed to meet for coffee, and Coach Belichick said, look, I've only got about an hour because his then girlfriend said they had plans or something. And so anyhow, we meet for coffee. And I don't know what I was expecting, but it was Belichick hanging on every word my dad
I'll bet you.
About talking about the history of college football and how all the coaches from up in the Northeast came down to Auburn and Georgia Tech, John Heisman, and all the different coaches from the Northeast that came down and influenced, Southern football but literally, we're an hour in, and Coach Belichick's girlfriend at the time shows up on her bike and says, "Bill, we need to go. We're supposed to be somewhere, whatever." He said, "I'll be a little bit longer." They sat there and talked for 3 hours.
That's awesome. That is so awesome.
Love it.
To your point, and I went into the conversation like my dad's gonna, this is gonna be a real thrill for him to sit there and talk football with Belichick and this and that, and it just. And look, Dad enjoyed that too, and Belichick had his pieces in there and all, but it was the conversation went a lot differently than what I anticipated, and I think that speaks to Dad's story.
I think it also speaks to Coach Belichick's.
He's a well-known historian of football himself, and so he appreciated Dad's history. He appreciated the knowledge of Dad's history.
Heroes and legends. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think Belichick, now he can learn X's and O's from a lot of guys, and it's constantly changing. But there's only so many chances you get, I'm sure Belichick thought, to hear about Bear Bryant through Coach Dye, to hear about Coach Dye's big game moments, how things that happen dramatically with players, emotional, how to motivate kids. I bet it doesn't surprise me that Belichick was all ears.
Yeah.
And the greatest rivalry, in my opinion, in sports, Alabama-Auburn, with all due respect to Michigan, Ohio State, and the Yankees and the Red Sox. You want passion, and hell, all you got to do is look this past year on the fourth down. Probably speaking to that, something that Belichick, being a longtime pro guy, that's a different animal than the religion that college football is, and no better storyteller of that was your father.
Well, I appreciate that, and I know. I mean, look. I grew up in Tuscaloosa. I grew up 9 seasons at Alabama, and I know the Auburn Alabama game has always been big, but I think it became a lot bigger with Dad, and with Dad making Auburn more competitive, and then to bring that, of all the things that he did above and beyond winning 4 SEC championships, to bring that game to Auburn and ultimately to Tuscaloosa. Look what it's done for both schools, both Tuscaloosa and Auburn's infrastructure, the restaurants, the hotels, all that. I mean, I don't think people realize a lot of people don't realize what a huge impact moving that game to on campus for both schools. And I remember Jimmy Rain was honoring Dad, 4 or 5 years ago at his annual spring charity thing. And I remember introducing Dad, and even though Jimmy's an Auburn guy, there were a ton of Alabama people, in the audience, because it's a charity fundraiser for scholarships for kids to go to Alabama, go to Auburn, whatever. And I started, talking about Dad and his legacy and everything. And I ultimately said, would those of y'all that would like to take the Auburn Alabama game back to Legion Field, would you please raise your hand? And there was no one. I mean, who would? And the Auburn kids love going to Tuscaloosa. The Alabama kids love going to Auburn. They grew up together in Mountain Brook, Mobile, Montgomery. You name it. And again, just what that does for season ticket sales and the local, hospitality, hotels, restaurants, all that. And it's a beautiful thing. And I do think with what Dad started, it has made the rivalry more competitive, and it's not so one-sided. And I don't know what the statistics are now, but there was a fascinating statistic that I looked at myself. When you looked at the Auburn, Alabama, the one-loss record for Auburn, Alabama, in the 40 years before Dad got there, and then you looked at it in the 40 years after he got there, I mean, it is way more competitive.
Yeah. Pat, to your story, I was about moving the game out of Birmingham. Auburn people always felt don't give me this neutral Legion Field crap. Yeah, but and when you come back in your cars on cinder blocks, it didn't feel very neutral. But
you had to pay somebody $20 to park it,
Yeah.
in your yard and $20 to guard it.
Damn right.
Pat, I want you to carry this with you. I was in the room. It was at Selwood Farms in Childersburg, and Coach Dye came, and it was about an equal number of Auburn and Bama guys, charitable event. And Coach Dye, he's so good at, was holding court, and everybody was on the edge of their seat. And I said, oh no, here he goes. He started talking about moving the game out of Legion Field. And he said, some Auburn people hope you don't mind my impersonation, Pat, but some Auburn people get mad at me that I'm too nice to Alabama, but Coach Bryant hired me and gave me a start there, and I'll always respect their program, and I'm okay with that. And he said, but I got to tell you something to you Bama guys. He started getting pretty mad. He said, y'all need to thank me for moving the game to Auburn because you don't see Alabama playing in Birmingham anymore. And he said, if I'd kept it there, we'd still be playing the Iron Bowl in Inslee.
Yeah.
That's right. And he used to say, because in Birmingham, if you had 3rd and 1, you better get 4.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when Coach Bryant was coaching, because I mean, look, let's be honest. Let's be honest. There is a reason that the Southeastern Conference is in Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah.
No doubt.
It was Coach Bryant, and I know there have been discussions about moving it to Atlanta. It's not going to happen. I mean, it won't happen now. And look, I get it. I mean, Greg Sankey's doing a great job with the conference. The conference is rolling, whatever. But it's a little bit like the ACC office in Greensboro. The University of North Carolina controlled that, back in the day. And so, anyways.
When you're waiting for that replay call to come in, and it's Patrick Peterson's foot in bounds, and you're in Tuscaloosa and it's a live interception, you know exactly where that call's coming in from. It's Birmingham. It's in the back of your mind.
Or tackling Greg Richardson in bounds on 3rd down in 1985 and not getting the call.
Yeah.
Funny stuff, man.
Guys, I got to bounce. Pat,
Thank
so
you,
good
Doug.
to talk
We'll
to you,
talk
brother.
to you this weekend.
Yeah, good talk to you too.
Pat, I remember November 29th of 2013, Becca Varner, one of my friend's nieces, had worked for your dad a couple of years as an intern at Crooked Oaks at the Lodge. So she goes, hey, I had Wilson and Max. My daughter stayed up in Franklin at the grandparents', and I had 2 tickets in section 42 for my boys, and I'd get my own ticket. So she said, Coach Dye wants us to come by about 4:30 on that Friday afternoon, November 29th, 2013. And we're like, is the Pope Catholic? Yeah, let's go. So we went out there, and your dad comes outside and gives Becca a hug, and her dad, David. And then I've got Wilson and Max, my boys, with me. And, Max has on his Pat Sullivan jersey that I got in 1970 as a kid that Pat had autographed. And we go in there, and your dad's having a cocktail. It's the Arkansas LSU game is on in the treehouse. And I said, guys, y'all know the rules. Don't talk bad about Alabama because you love Coach Bryant like a father. And Boyd Boylston helped meet the two get together back in 65. Don't talk bad about Georgia because he was an All-American there, and his older brothers Nat and Wayne went there, and his mother had season tickets, I believe, till the day she died. And I said, and above all else, just listen. And I mean, that was one of the coolest days. And I, of course, go in the kitchen. There's the picture of him and Coach Bryant right there by the phone on that right there. And we just listened. And one of my boys said, Coach Dye, you think we're going to beat Alabama? And he goes, well, I tell you one thing, Gus is going to get after that ass. And it was just one of the coolest things I always remember. But, Pat, do you remember George Lapidus was a great sports writer in the Memphis Press-Seminar. In August of 1982, his headline on the Skywriters tour was, "Oh, Bo, Auburn claims a Herschel clone." And he'd had dinner with your parents the night before, and your dad was talking about him. But another thing hilarious was David Housel called up on a show one time in Memphis and said, watermelon, watermelon, red to the Rhine. If you're going to buy one of mine. That's what your dad, they would pull that little wagon around selling watermelons in Blythe, Georgia. But I think just your life is so special because you're so blessed at what you grew up with. I mean, your dad, and Frank, you know this, I mean, my parents are 89 and 96. Dad's watching right now. And Ralph Jordan Jr., Ralph's a good friend of mine, used to love to go out and visit with your dad. And that connection will always be there. And our theme is history, traditions, and heroes. But I just think about why. And when Audrey and I were in your office one time about 4 years ago, you were on the phone just listening to that conversation. It was so cool. And the kids that you're talking to, their moms and dads, aunts and uncles will go, let me tell you something, who his father was. That respect was earned, and you keep it going. So, man, this is just an awesome conversation, and really appreciate you coming on here with us. But, man, it tells me people saying, hey, college football will never be what it was, but I'm glad I was there. You know what? It's always darkest before dawn. We're going to figure this out. We're going to get better. But you can't find a documentary on the SEC. Saturdays in the South. I watched it this week. And there's your dad talking about, we used to stay up there and listen to Pula Hubert over there at Alabama. He goes, we didn't have any of that damn social media. He shares the sentiments of a lot of people, doesn't he?
Yeah. Well, it's obviously changed a lot, and they're and I've got great respect for Coach Saban and Kirby Smart and some of the other top coaches around. But I mean, the days of Bear Bryant and Bo Schembechler and Johnny Majors and Vince Dooley and Pat Dye and Gene Stallings. I mean, it's just, you just don't see it. And I don't, and maybe those guys wouldn't thrive in today's college football world. I don't know.
I think they would.
I think they would too.
They would adapt. They would adapt.
I will say this, and this was fascinating to me, and it frankly, sometimes I have to draw on this because, I just turned 62, and I'm talking to young men that are 20, 21, 22, and I'm like, I worry sometimes about my relatability. And it's not because I can't carry on a conversation or whatever, but I worry about in their minds, just this stereotype, like, I can't have a relationship with this guy at 62 years old. But I think about my dad. I mean, literally the year he died, when he was 80 years old, would go out to Auburn practice, and those kids would surround him like he was Moses. Yep. I mean, and hanging on every word, and he made them laugh, and he'd be honest with them. He'd tell them, you got to get it in gear. You got to take it to another level. You got to push yourself further than you think you can push yourself. And these coaches, I know you're tired of them yelling and screaming at you, whatever. They're just trying to make you better players and better men. But he still had an ability to connect to today's kid, even at 80 years old. And I just, I don't know if that's God-given. I don't know. I mean, he had an uncanny knack for being able to communicate black, white, rich, poor, whatever. I don't think it's any accident that he signed the first 2 black players ever to play at the University of Alabama, which, I mean, that's a monumental. Yeah. That is a monument. You think about the University of Alabama and you think about George Wallace standing in front of the front door of the university. That's a monumental.
Sylvester Crooms.
Yeah, well, it was actually Wilbur Marshall and John Mitchell were the first. Sylvester came after that from Tuscaloosa High School, but Dad signed Sylvester. But yeah, back to your whole point, the life I've lived, I've been very, very blessed. And I think beyond just growing up Coach Dye's son and growing up around Coach Bryant and being a classmate of Bo Jackson's and watching all the crazy things he did, not only on Saturday on television, but on Tuesday in practice. I mean, the stuff we saw off the field that the cameras didn't record, you wouldn't believe. But then to be blessed to go on to have a very, very successful 37-year career doing what I'm doing now and representing the likes of Emmitt Smith and Brian Urlacher and DeMarcus Ware and Andrew Whitworth and all the hundreds of NFL players I've had an opportunity to do it. And
Kadarius Toney. Yeah,
it's not lost on me at all. Landon Dickerson, who I just made the highest paid offensive guard in NFL history. Great person and player from Alabama. And we kid each other all the time. But and it's not lost on me that I I did have advantages because of my last name, and I did have access. I mean, I remember, one of the first rounders I ever signed played for Billy Brewer at Ole Miss, a guy named Tony Bennett, Gator
Alligator,
Bennett.
Mississippi.
Yes, and because of my dad's relationship with Coach Brewer and Coach Brewer's respect for my dad,
Wow.
it just flowed down to me. And Coach Brewer literally walked me in the athletic training table and athletic dorm cafeteria at Ole Miss and introduced me to Tony. And I don't think that happens if I'm not Pat Dye Jr. I mean, the coaches don't like agents. They don't trust agents. But he knew my father, and he knew my father would kick my ass from Oxford to Auburn and back if I did anything wrong to one of his players. So
yeah.
But the old saying is that got your foot in the door, but your talent kept you in the room. That's the different story.
Listen, I know this to be true, and I don't go around wearing this on my sleeve necessarily, but I have worked my tail off. I have worked my tail off since I got into this business. The travel, the stress, all of it.
Scott has told me you're the hardest working guy in the agent world.
Well, and worse yet, I went through 6 years ago, went through a very expensive divorce, and I've worked hard the last 5 years, and I've worked a 5-year stint in my career.
It's called a catch up.
Yeah. Well, I got half my pizza taken away, so I'm trying to make some more.
Pat, when Audrey and I went into your office about 4 years ago, the morale in that place, you can tell people love working for you. And they all, the girls would talk about your dad and just your family. And you bought that pump 12-gauge shotgun, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Robert Weaver's listening to the show right now at Corona Farms. Wants you to come up here and hunt. We want you to come back and hunt with us. We got a place we want to take you this year, and I'm going to load you up with some Migra shells. I've got a bunch of them. But, Pat, we need more. People need to hear more from you. Frank, you're right. As far as relatability, Pat, you know what never goes out of style? Real, authentic lives. What you said about how you grew up, and people don't realize that when you talk to these guys and their families, they relate to it because you come through. Frank, I think you would agree, and I know Doug would and Dave would before he had to go. That's about as real as it gets, isn't it?
Absolutely. Hey, Pat, we're going to have my LSU RV on the plains, the loveliest plains for when Oklahoma comes in to play Auburn. Come on over and have some gumbo or jambalaya with us. I don't know what the hell's going to happen to my LSU striped purple and gold RV at that game, but as long as it doesn't get jacked up on blocks, we're going to be having a good time. Come on over and look. I'm sure there's an Auburn or Oklahoma guy you're going to be trying to get as an agent. You can write the damn thing off.
Yeah,
well,
that's right.
I think there's less chance of something happening to your RV if you're there at the Oklahoma game than it would be if you were at an Auburn LSU game.
Hey, that damn thing can burn down. We know what the crazy stuff that happens in those games.
There's no doubt. But I have already got that game on my calendar. I'm definitely coming. I think that's an iconic or a matchup of two iconic programs.
Yeah.
Really, really cool that Oklahoma's coming to Auburn. And I'm excited about Oklahoma and Texas coming in the conference. And I think it's just, really further amplifies the SEC's power and influence and the richness of their tradition and history and the resources and the state of Texas and the eyeballs that's going to bring. And it's going to be good stuff. Really good stuff.
And I'll make a bold comment. The winner of that game is going to be the surprise team in the SEC this year. That's a crossroads game.
Wow. Like that.
Yeah. Well, Pat, Junior, we got to get you to get. I need to get you to get one of these Barnwood Brenda's SEC maps. She carved that for me out of cypress. She does them out of barnwood and cedar and stuff like that. But put one of those in your office. You still got the rule: you don't get your framed jersey on the wall at your office there in Buckhead until you make All Pro. Correct?
That is, you got to make the Pro Bowl. That's the only way you can get anything hung at our office. And fortunately, we have 31 different guys that have done that. So we're very proud of that.
Pretty good skins on the wall.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you for going along with us. It's so much fun having you on here. But we'll see you at the Oklahoma game. We'll get in touch with you before then. And coming out there to Bingo 1 and just come with an empty stomach, because Frank will put the lost bread, the gumbo, the jambalaya, and we're going to bring duck and venison. If it ever ran, flew, swam, or crawled, it's going on the grill. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Have a great weekend. God bless you. We'll see you Monday morning. Appreciate it.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal, and the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.